the costume was quite a funny one when shooting. It was both ends of the spectrum. I was either wearing very sort of traditional Victorian clothes of frock coat and a waistcoat, cravat, and spats and a top hat. The image was very powerful when shooting. To wearing nothing. Lorcan goes through this irreversible transformation. I would wander around for days at a time on set wearing pretty much nothing, which is it's daunting, the first day or two, but once the cast and crew have seen everything, it's you just sort of get on with it. But the director was always sort of very keen to reassure me that it was always going to be done well, in good taste. So it wasn't too much to worry about. Yeah.
The costumes were fantastic. They really, for me, added a huge amount. Almost immediately of putting on the clothes and the waistcoat and having the cravat, you get a sense of what it must have been like to wander around, just to be part of that world.
When women wore corsets, the idea behind the corset was to create what was perceived as the perfect shape. So it was this kind of hourglass shape with a waist absolutely tiny. So the corsets were designed to squeeze about 6 to 8 inches off your actual waist size, and they were usually made with real whalebone. So you'd have someone who would fit the corset on you, tie it up, and then squeeze till your waist shrunk before your very eyes. So that was something that I had never experienced before, and it literally took my breath away. The first time I put it on, I actually fainted. But back then, it was taken for granted. It was part of being a woman. You wore a corset, and that shape was the acceptable shape. So for me, wearing a corset, because it was a new experience, I had to get used to it. Because if you're going to run around in a corset acting, you want to be able to do it without fainting every 5 minutes. So I went into corset training, which was actually kind of tough going at first. I got used to it, but you learn to sit a certain way, because now we're so loose, we can sit forward. When you're wearing a corset, you sit upright, you stand upright, there's not an awful lot of movement. You learn to control your breathing in a certain way. You learn not to eat too much, because if you do, it just all comes up here, which is a really unpleasant experience. And yeah, you take it easy when you're wearing a corset. You don't run around too madly.
Matron wore a wonderful black bustle dress, so it had a bustle at the back and it had a tight corset underneath. And obviously for her, wearing a corset wasn't about creating an hourglass figure. It was about her composure and her posture and setting a good example to her young nurses. And as soon as you put on a costume like that, one's shoulders go back, and you really, or I really did, feel a sense of authority for my surroundings, which was the hospital ward. Even down to the shoes that I wore that you never saw, which were these tiny, well not tiny, but these tightly laced black shoes that completely affected the way I walked and I stood, and in turn that affected the way I spoke and I held myself.
As part of my research, I went to the National Portrait Gallery to have a look at people of that era, and you see them with these very tight collars and cravats and very posed and poised. And certainly the minute you step into that clothing, you get a sense of what it must feel like to be in that era.
One of the interesting things about a lot of period costumes, sort of going back from Victorian and before, is that they're quite tight-fitting, straight-laced, as it were. And this is particularly so for female characters. So it does encourage good posture, which can be a very good thing. Certainly for me, I tend to stoop a bit. So I enjoy wearing period costumes. This one, as you will have seen, is quite an alarming colour. I don't think I've ever worn a yellow suit before.
And this is supposed to be the work of a psychiatric patient.
The transformation from Lorcan turning into this demon was an interesting one in terms of costume. I mean, I had to get these molds fitted. I had these ears, which I literally had to sit and sort of stick my head in plaster of Paris, and then they were made up. And I had these wonderful fangs that were, with endless hours of amusement for me. But also, I had to shave my hair off. I pretty much shaved to share a non-sharing zone. every hair off from here to the tips of my toes, barring my eyebrows. They were the one thing I wouldn't have shaved off. We used prosthetics to have those removed. As he becomes this demonic beast, it was a very specific idea the director had, and I'd seen sketches. So he had this beautiful image of this gaunt, callous creature with these long talons that you could see, very skeletal. Mark sort of specified early on that he wanted Lorcan to become quite gaunt, to become quite callous and demonic, to become this creature. And so I took it a little too hard, and I went on a specific diet of celery and oranges for 5 weeks. I managed to shift 3 stone, which was a tricky one to maintain once I'd actually hit the weight, because once I was where I wanted to be, I didn't really have anything to aim for anymore. But it was a fun one. It was a good laugh, and it's nice to have that discipline and to know that you can do it. It's although I used to get quite a lot of sympathetic glances on public transport. Bald head and 3 stone lighter than I usually am.